Hello and welcome to the One Life Church devotional series where we cover the entire Bible in 20 months. Well, today's chapters are Hosea 4 and 5. Now remember, Hosea was one of the 12 minor prophets. He lived in the northern territories of Israel around about the fall of that northern kingdom. He prophesied during the horrific reign of Jeroboam II. And generally, the basic message that Hosea has is that the people of God had turned from him, that he was going to judge them by means of the Assyrian army, and then there would be a restoration when the people of God would come back to him. So remember, in the first couple of chapters, we saw an illustration of Hosea's marriage to this adulterous woman. And now this section starts a whole new section. And we see that because in verse 1 it says, "Hear the word of the Lord." So it's a whole new section. And he's basically looking at the unfaithfulness of Israel. It's quite depressing, actually, if you read this just in isolation. He says, there is no faithfulness and no love. When there's no faithfulness, there's no love. Look, think about that in a normal marriage. If you're unfaithful, that is the betrayal of love. No acknowledgement of God in the land. And because of this, the land dries up. And we know that in a marriage situation, if there's no faithfulness, no love, the fruitfulness, the savor of that marriage is gone. You stumble day and night, he says, and your prophets stumble with you. What we like to do is gather around ourselves people who will echo what we're thinking, what we're wanting to do. In fact, in the last days, the Bible says that we will gather around ourselves a multitude of teachers telling us what our itching ears want to hear. He's basically saying here, the prophets of the day are stumbling together with the people. They've been gathered around. They're just echoing the adultery of the community. My people are destroyed from a lack of knowledge. Now, that is a theme that runs right the way through the Bible. When we don't have that knowledge is an intimate knowing of God. If you don't know his word, if you don't know God, destruction is coming. And so today, the application today is that if you hear the gospel, harden your heart and do not get to know God and to know his word, destruction is coming. The priests exchanged the glorious God for something disgraceful. So in other words, it's possible, even in church environments, to trade the authentic for the religious, to trade the authentic encounter of God and his word with something which is man-made. And he says, he calls that disgraceful. They will eat but not have enough. They will engage in prostitution but not flourish. So if you turn your back on God and try to sustain yourself, he said, even when you gather yourself food, you're not going to feel like you're satisfied. He says, I will not punish your daughters when they turn to prostitution, or your daughter-in-laws when they become adulterous, because the men themselves have consulted with harlots and sacrificed to shrine prostitutes. He's basically saying, you're following this analogy, that your world is falling apart, your women are running rampant, but actually the men, I want to call the men to account. That's what he's saying. And it's them that I'm holding to account. He says, Israelites are like a stubborn heifer. Imagine a young herd that is digging its heels in and saying, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. He says, because you're like a stubborn heifer, how can the Lord pasture you in meadows like lamb? He says, you've got to develop that lamb-like, sheep-like adoration for the shepherd. Verse 5 says, hear this, O priests. Pay attention, you Israelites. Listen, your royal household. He said, look, don't kid yourself. Just because you're royalty, just because people are saluting you, just because you have a job as a priest, don't think you're off the hook. I know about you, Ephraim. Israel is not hidden from me. He says, God sees everything, sees your hearts. Their deeds do not permit them to return to God. They have a spirit of prostitution. See, actually, it's your heart. It's your heart. He's gunning at their heart. He's saying, there's a spirit inside of you that's turning away from me. And he says, and they will come to me with their flocks and their herds, talking about sacrifices, and they will not find me, he says in verse 6. I think this is the most incredible phrase. They are unfaithful to the Lord they give birth to illegitimate children. A type of religion, a type of spiritual activity that is not intimate with God is going to produce fruit, but it's illegitimate fruit. And then he says to them, it ends with a word of hope. Then I will return to my lair. He says, I've been like a lion disciplining them. I'll return to my lair, and in their misery, they will earnestly seek me. Why does God allow the discipline? Why does God allow tough times? Well, he's saying, I want them to earnestly seek me, to see that their pursuit of their gods, their ways, their methods are fruitless.